Police say the parents of 4-year-old Javeayah Harris are now under arrest. The missing child is at the center of a massive search that is sadly now leading to a deadly update. News 19's Ariana Clay is sharing more from today's news conference, including ongoing efforts centered around this little girl.
Before I dive in, a quick note. This case is still active. No trial, no conviction, and Javeayah's body hasn't been recovered yet. I've written this using only verified reporting, and I've kept language around guilt careful, allegedly, authorities say. Since the parents have only been charged, not convicted, for days. Thousands of volunteers, helicopters, drones, cadaver dogs, 3,000 acres of South Carolina woods and fields torn apart looking for one little girl. And the whole time, the people leading that search, standing at the podium every day asking the public for help, investigators now believe already knew the truth. They just weren't saying it yet. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being a missing child case. It became something much darker. And by the time the sheriff stood in front of the cameras to tell everyone what they'd found, it wasn't a rescue. It was a homicide investigation. Before we get into this one, if you're new here, this is The Last Witness. And if true crime cases like this keep you up thinking the way they keep me up thinking, hit subscribe and tap that bell. Because these cases move fast, new details drop constantly, and I don't want you finding out the ending before I get to tell you the story properly. Okay, let's talk about Javeayah. Javeayah Harris was 4 years old. She lived in Aiken County, South Carolina, with her parents, 23-year-old Javeayah Harris and 22-year-old Michelle Herring. On the evening of June 30th, 2026, a Tuesday, Herring called 911. She told police that Javeayah had been playing outside near the family's chicken coop and had simply vanished. Last seen around 8:15 p.m. near the intersection of Hillsboro Street and Ridgecrest Road. Now, if you've watched enough of these cases, you know how fast a call like that mobilizes a community. Within hours, this wasn't just local police knocking on doors. This became a full multi-agency operation. The Aiken County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, North Augusta Police, Edgefield County, Lexington County, State Highway Patrol, volunteer fire departments, search and rescue teams combing through ponds and wooded areas. At one point, they were covering more than 5,000 acres of land. Helicopters overhead, drones scanning tree lines. This was one of the largest searches this part of South Carolina had seen in years, all for one 4-year-old girl. And here's the part that really gets me. For a moment, on that Thursday, there was a shift in the story. A deputy on scene briefly described it as a possible abduction, which, if you're a parent, if you're anybody with a heart, that's almost worse to hear, because now you're picturing a stranger, a predator, somebody out there who took her. But almost as quickly as that word got out, authorities walked it back and said the deputy had simply misspoken. No abduction theory, just vanished. So the search continued exactly as it had been. Volunteers walking shoulder to shoulder through fields. The FBI's Columbia office posting on social media, practically pleading with the public, saying they were leaving no place unchecked, using the hashtag #FindJaveayah. Everybody wanted this story to end with a little girl running into her mother's arms. Let's sit with that for a second, because I think this is where the emotional weight of this case really lives. For 4 days, an entire community organized itself around hope. Churches opened their doors. Strangers who never met this family took time off work to walk through brush and briars in South Carolina heat, hoping to be the one who spotted a small shoe, a scrap of fabric, anything. That's not nothing. That's real. People believed they were looking for a living child. And somewhere, according to what investigators now say, that hope was already impossible, because behind the scenes, cracks were starting to show in the story law enforcement had been given. This is where the tension starts to build, and I want you to really pay attention to the timeline here, because it matters. While search teams were out combing acreage, detectives were doing what detectives do quietly in the background. They were re-interviewing the parents, cross-checking timelines, looking at digital evidence, behavior, inconsistencies. According to the FBI, agents were involved from the very start, not just in the physical search, but in canvassing, digital evidence review, and behavioral analysis. That phrase, behavioral analysis, should tell you something. That's not what you use when you're only looking for a lost child in the woods. That's what you use when you suspect the story you were told doesn't match reality. And then something happened that I think is one of the more chilling details in this whole case. On Wednesday, in the middle of all of this, in the middle of a massive search for her daughter, Javeayah Harris gave birth. A new baby, born into a family already at the center of a missing child investigation. Investigators later confirmed that newborn was placed with relatives. Sit with that timeline for a second. A woman is pregnant, close to delivering, while telling police her 4-year-old vanished near a chicken coop. And investigators, we'll get to why in a moment, no longer believe that's actually when Javeayah disappeared at all. Because here's the twist. Here's the moment this case flips completely. On Saturday, 4 days after that 911 call, Aiken County Sheriff Marty Sawyer called a press conference. And what he said in that room, in his own words, was that this was the hardest announcement he had made in 36 years of law enforcement. He told the public that the investigation and evidence led them to believe Javeayah Harris was already dead. Not missing, not lost, dead. But here's the part that turns this from tragic into something far more disturbing. Sawyer said investigators believe Javeayah had already been deceased for roughly a month before that 911 call was ever made. A month, meaning the frantic 911 call on June 30th. The story about a child wandering off near the chicken coop, the entire premise that sent thousands of volunteers into the woods. Authorities now allege that call, and that story, were false. Harris has in fact been charged not only with homicide by child abuse, but also with filing a false police report. Her father, Javeayah Harris, was arrested and charged with homicide by child abuse as well. Let that land for a moment. If investigators are right, this wasn't a child who slipped away in an instant of bad luck near a backyard chicken coop. This was, according to authorities, a story constructed weeks after the fact, designed to explain an absence that had already existed for a very long time. Javeayah's father initially told investigators he'd been away from home that night, at a laundromat, and stopped at a convenience store. Whether that account holds up, whether it was fabricated in advance to support a narrative, is something investigators have not fully laid out publicly yet. But you can see how the picture starts changing. This wasn't a sudden panic. If the timeline authorities describe is accurate, this was, on some level, a performance. I want to be fair here, because this is important, and I always try to be careful with you all on this channel. Javeayah Harris and Javeayah Harris have been charged. They have not been convicted. Under the law, they are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a courtroom, and a lot of what we know right now comes from allegations, from a sheriff's statement, from an active and ongoing investigation. Investigators have not publicly clarified whether they believe both parents were directly involved in Javeayah's death, or whether one parent may have caused it while the other helped conceal what happened. That distinction matters enormously, and right now, the public doesn't have that answer. What we do know is this. Both parents appeared before a magistrate judge and were denied bond. Harris was told she'll make her next court appearance in September. During that hearing, she told the judge she works at a call center, paid bi-weekly, and when asked who else lived in her household, she said the father, who she said works for a shipping company. The judge determined her income was too high to qualify for a court-appointed attorney. Javeayah Harris had a separate hearing that same day. He, too, was denied bond, told the judge he worked at a shipping and tire company, but when asked how much he earned, he said he didn't know. He struggled to answer basic questions about his own finances in that courtroom. Both of them will remain in custody until a circuit court judge can consider bond on the homicide charges, since a magistrate judge doesn't have authority over bond in cases like this. And here's a detail that's been circulating that I think adds another layer of unease to this whole case. There's a booking photo of Javeayah Harris that shows him wearing what's sometimes called a turtle suit, a tear-resistant garment used in some jails, typically issued when officials have specific safety concerns about an inmate. Now, I want to be really careful here, because news outlets covering this have been responsible about this detail, and so will I. That garment can be used for a range of reasons. It is not confirmation of anything. It's not evidence of guilt, and it's not evidence of a mental health crisis. The jail hasn't explained why he was placed in it. But it's the kind of image that sticks with people that makes a case feel heavier, even when we don't fully understand the context behind it. Now here's where this case gets even more layered, and honestly, kind of haunting if you ask me. Screenshots have surfaced online, reportedly shared by Javeayah's uncle, of text conversations between him and Javeayah Harris going back to May weeks before Javeayah was ever reported missing. According to those screenshots, he texted Herring, and in his messages, he never brought up Javeayah on his own. It was only when he specifically asked how she was doing that things got strange. Herring, according to these screenshots, didn't answer the question about her daughter. Instead, after he sent her a photo of some yard work he'd been doing, she redirected the conversation entirely, talking about going fishing together sometime, about double dates. A grown woman, allegedly avoiding a direct question about her own missing daughter, and instead talking about fishing trips and double dates. If those screenshots are authentic, and I want to stress, law enforcement has not verified them and has not commented on whether they're even part of the investigation. That's an incredibly cold thing to read. And then there's this detail that honestly stopped me when I read it. Reportedly, in that same conversation, Herring sent her brother an old video of Javeayah playing at a park, pretending to be a pirate. A joyful little clip of a 4-year-old using her imagination, sent casually into a conversation where her mother wouldn't answer a simple question about where she actually was. I don't know about you, but that detail is the one that sits with me the longest out of this entire case. Not the chicken coop story, not the false report charge, not even the month-long timeline discrepancy. It's the idea of a mother sending a video of her daughter pretending to be a pirate, laughing, full of life, while allegedly already knowing that child was gone. The search for Javeayah's actual remains is still ongoing as I'm putting this together for you. Investigators have said they are actively searching an area outside of Aiken County, and at one point, SLED deployed a helicopter to a wooded area near Great Falls, which is a good distance away from where the family lives. Authorities haven't explained publicly what evidence led them there, or whether they believe her body was transported to that location. That's still an open question. As of right now, Javeayah has not been found. The FBI has said plainly that their focus now isn't a rescue mission anymore. It's pursuing justice for her. The community hasn't turned away from this either. A candlelight vigil was held in Aiken, with organizers asking neighbors and friends to bring candles, to remember Javeayah's life, and to pray for justice for her. If convicted of homicide by child abuse, both Harris and Herring could be facing a sentence ranging anywhere from 20 years up to life in prison. But convictions take time. Their next court appearances aren't scheduled until September, which means, for now, all of this sits in this strange, unresolved space. Charges filed, a community grieving, a body still missing, and 2 people in custody who, legally, we still have to describe as accused, not guilty, no matter how damning the details sound. So here's what I keep turning over in my head with this one, and I want you to sit with these questions too, because I don't think there are easy answers. If investigators are right, and Javeayah was gone for roughly a month before anyone reported it, what does that say about the weeks in between? What does it take for 2 people to go about daily life, work shifts, a pregnancy, a birth, ordinary conversations with family, while allegedly carrying something like that in silence? Is that trauma? Is that dissociation? Or is it something colder, something more calculated? And when Herring allegedly sidestepped her own brother's simple question about her daughter's whereabouts, was that panic, or was that practice, a rehearsed redirect she'd already used before? I also keep thinking about that search. Thousands of people, strangers, walking fields and woods in the summer heat, believing they might find a living child. What does it mean for a community's grief and effort to be built on a story that, if authorities are correct, was already known to be false by the people who told it? Does that make their compassion less real? I don't think so. I think, if anything, it makes it more important to hold on to. Because that search, that outpouring, that's the part of this story that was genuine, even if the reason behind it wasn't. And finally, I keep coming back to this. We may not get real clarity here for a long time. The body hasn't been recovered. Court dates are months away. The full evidence, the actual timeline, what each parent knew and when, none of that has been laid out yet in a courtroom where it can actually be tested. So I want to ask you honestly, when a case like this unfolds in the media before it unfolds in court, how do we hold space for a missing child, for a grieving community, and for the presumption of innocence, all at the same time? Because I think that tension, more than almost any other case I've covered, is what makes this one so hard to sit with. If this case affected you the way it affected me, I want to hear your take on it. Drop a comment and tell me which part of this hit you the hardest, because I read every single one, and honestly, this is the kind of case where I need to hear other people process it out loud too. And if you want to be here the moment new developments in this case break, because there will be more, subscribe to The Last Witness and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss it. We'll be following this one all the way to the courtroom. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.